Alrighty, in this video, we are going to be talking about Gulp 3. So, Gulp 3 is the current version that I get when I do npm install Gulp. But for you future people, might not be the case. Hopefully Gulp 4 has been out by the time you're watching this. It is production ready. It is very mature. The simple fact is that the actual backend of Gulp hasn't changed a whole lot. There have been some deprecations, some reorganizations, and some other things. The biggest difference is how you define tasks and dependencies, as well as a bug, which we'll talk about in this video, that has fortunately been corrected with Gulp 4. So yeah, I did do this kind of backwards. I showed you guys Gulp 4, and now I'm showing you guys the differences between 3 and 4, but this will help anybody who wants to work on a project that's still using 3. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to npm install, I'm going to npm init first. Blah, 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 don't care. And then I'm going to go ahead, again, that created a package JSON in this directory. Then I'm going to go ahead and npm install Gulp, but I'm going to specify a version here. I'm actually specifying the version that, for me, being in the past, would be the current version. But if you guys want to follow along and Gulp 4 has already been released, you're going to have to do this. So say Gulp, and then @ and then caret, and I believe it's 390. So that's going to be the version I'm going to be working with, or at least the major version that I'm working with. Go ahead and hit enter and let that install. Of course, I forgot to save dev. If you did too, be sure that you do save dev, because you should save dev. Sorry about that. Okay, now we're installed for real. So, I know, this is interesting. Let's go ahead and type in Gulp and hit enter. So we're going to see no Gulp file found. But what's more interesting is I'm going to go ahead and run Gulp version. Now look at the version numbers we're getting. We're getting the CLI of 040, but we're getting the local version of 390. So remember how at the beginning of this course, I actually completely uninstalled Node, npm, removed all paths, removed all installations, removed all Node packages from my system to do this series. And so when you guys saw me install Gulp 4 a couple videos ago, globally, that's the version of Gulp that I'm running globally. But we can see right here that because we have a local version, then what we're going to get when we run the Gulp CLI is the version that we installed. In this case, 390. It doesn't work the other way around. If you have a CLI version of 3, you will not be able to run local versions of 4. But if you have a CLI version of 4, you will be able to run local versions of 3. So at this point, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and grab some Gulp plugins. I want to throw together a couple quick examples to really underscore the differences of how we define our tasks with Gulp 3 versus Gulp 4. So I'm going to do npm install, we'll do Gulp less, we'll do Gulp Babel, we'll do Babel preset ES 2015, and we'll do Gulp load plugins, and I'll go ahead and save dev on that. So all these will be installed into our package.json, which is significant because remember, Gulp load plugins will only work when our Gulp plugins are specified in our project.json file. Another thing to note is that I am installing the exact same versions of the exact same plugins that we used in Gulp 4. Just to reiterate, the internals of Gulp are pretty much the same. There are a couple differences. The biggest difference is how you define tasks. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. To set this example up, I'm going to go ahead and create some folders. So I'll do my source folder. Under that, I'll do my styles folder. Under source again, I'll do my scripts folder. And under styles, I'll just do site.less. And I'll throw some lessisms at it. So I guess we could do a body.test color red. And then in our scripts, let's throw some, let's do an app.js and throw some ECMA script 2015 isms at it. So let's do a class person, say hi, console log. Whoa. All right. Oh, it's going to do that to me, isn't it? I should have remembered. Okay, let's go ahead and really quickly create a JSconfig file, .json, and specify our compiler options as having a target of ES6. Okay, so we have that taken care of. So again, we have a source folder, scripts folder, app.js, and a styles with a site less. Basically the same structure we had before. I'll go ahead and throw up a public folder as well, and we'll just do an assets folder in here. We'll just dump our CSS and JavaScript in the same folder. It doesn't really matter for this example. All right, so if I go, again, if I type in gulp, no gulp file found. So what's our first step? Let's create a gulp file. And just like before, we're going to go ahead and we're going to import gulp equals require gulp. Oops. And we're going to require money equals require gulp load plugins. Just like before. Okay, let's go ahead and define a task. So in Gulp 3, there's basically there is one way to define a task. There's no creating a function and then referencing that function. I mean, directly. So you can't do scripts and then do gulp task scripts. That will not work. As you can see, I can type in gulp tasks, and we're going to get an error because that's not valid. So we can't do that. Also, say goodbye to gulp series and gulp parallel. Those no longer exist. We'll talk about how to kind of sort of replicate their behavior. But as you'll see, using Gulp 3 is not as powerful as Gulp 4. So we can't do that. We could do this if we wanted to. But that's generally not how in Gulp 3 we define our tasks. Generally what we do is we do gulp task. And let's go ahead and do our dev scripts first. And then we specify a function. Now, just like Gulp 4, we should preferably return a stream. But as you see, Gulp 3 does not give us a warning when we do not return a stream or call the callback. Now, Gulp 3 does support the callback and returning a stream, but it's not going to yell at us. And I personally liked it when it yelled at me. But anyway, so our gulp task dev scripts, we've declared a task. We can go ahead and look at tasks and see our dev scripts. So inside dev scripts, we're just going to continue as normal. Again, really the difference is how we define tasks. It's not what goes in the tasks. So for example, I can go ahead and say return gulp source. Oops, come on. You can do it, code. I know you can. Gulp source, source scripts, then we pass in a glob, just like what we did before, and then we can do a pipe onto money babel, and then we can do a pipe to gulp dest, passing in our directory, which will be public assets. Of course, for this to work, we do have to go ahead and create a babel RC file, which will simply be a JavaScript object that has a presets property of type array, which has our awesome ES 2015 preset in it. So be sure you do that, otherwise your ES 2015 will not be translated. So jumping back into our gulp file, let's go ahead and run it. Gulp dev scripts, and we get an error because Babel is not defined. Babel is not defined because we did not execute our gulp load plugins. I'm leaving this in the video for emphasis. When you use gulp load plugins, be sure you execute it by adding these parentheses. They are significant. The export of gulp load plugins is a function, so you must execute that. And there are parameters you can pass in, but if you're interested about that, head on over to the npmjs.org page on that. Anyway, let's go ahead and run our scripts. Check that out, it ran. So let's open up public assets app.js, and we have a properly babbled JavaScript file with the ES 2015 preset. All right, so super exciting. We have our dev scripts. Let's go ahead and do our dev styles real fast. Gulp task, dev styles, and then we'll do our thingy here, and we'll do return gulp. Again, All we're seeing that's different is going to be the way we define tasks. So if I do source styles, and here I'm just going to do, what did I call that guy? Site.less. I should have known. That sounds like something I would do. Pipe into moneyless. I love saying that. Pipe into Gulp dest. And the Gulp dest is going to be public assets. Okay, so now if we run gulp dev styles, we have our styles ran. And if we open up site.css, we see it's been lessified. And now it's just straight up CSS. Okay, so obviously you can see some differences here. This is pretty much the only way to define your tasks. There is no gulp series, there is no gulp parallel. So how would we put together a dev task? For example, a task that ran both scripts and styles. Well, in Gulp 3, we use a optional parameter of the task function. So I can say dev, and then I can pass an array in as the second parameter, and say dev styles, dev scripts, and then I can also pass in an additional function if I wanted to. Dev done. This would not be required, but I'm just showing that you can, in addition to specifying dependencies, you can also run a script as well. So now if I did gulp dev, styles and scripts run in parallel. If I did gulp tasks, you notice that dev scripts is here, styles is here, and then dev depends on scripts and styles. So that's how we deal with dependencies. And it's not the best way to deal with dependencies because we don't have control over what runs in serial and what runs in parallel. Basically, the only way to mimic that behavior is to create a task. Anything that task depends on is going to be ran parallelly. So, for example, styles and scripts will run in parallel, but then the actual task I specified will not run until both are done. As you see, dev done only gets executed after styles and script have finished. All right, I do want to point out that we could also refactor these into functions. So I could say function styles, and I can just take this entire styles and cut it and paste it in here. And then instead of specifying a anonymous function here with the arrow syntax, I can just specify styles. That'll work as well. I can do gulp dev styles. But at the end of the day, one of the other issues is that these dependencies have to be string. So if I did styles right here as a dependency, we get an error. So basically, any task that's a dependency of another task needs to be registered. And that's actually not necessarily a good thing. There are times where you might want a task that other tasks depend on, but you don't necessarily want to register them with the gulp command line. And that's not going to be very easy or possible to do with Gulp 3. All right, let's go ahead and put up a watch task because this is a bug that you will run into, which is a consequence of how streams work and was fixed in Gulp 4, but you're going to have to deal with it in Gulp 3. So let's go ahead and make a watch task. So my watch task is going to depend on dev. And all he's going to do is he's simply going to say gulp watch. And we're going to pass in the same parameters that we passed in before in Gulp 4. So we're going to say gulp watch source styles site.less. And then we're going to run, it could be an array as well. We're going to run dev styles. And let's copy that for scripts. And run dev scripts. Now I can say gulp watch. And now we're watching. So I can come in here and let's go ahead and split this guy. And let's go ahead and open up our site.less and our site.css. So I can come in here and I can say header color blue, right? And it works. Seems like it's working just like it did in Gulp 4. What if I have a syntax error? Our styles watch task is no longer watching. As you see, by inserting an error, I'm not getting any new compilation. Now my scripts task, I can go ahead and say console log hey, and that'll compile. But if I introduce a syntax error, now the scripts task isn't running. And because both of those watch tasks are no longer running, the process exits and we're done. And that is super frustrating. We don't want to deal with that. I mean, come on, we're programmers. We introduce syntax errors all the time. We don't want to have to come back into a console window and relaunch our watch process. So how do we fix this? There's a couple ways. We can handle the error event on our streams, or we can monkey patch it. And there's a particular project out. So if you're using Gulp 3 and you're using watch, you're probably going to want to use this plugin. So let's jump over to our command line. And let's go ahead and npm install Gulp Plumber. Save dev. So again, we could add error handlers onto our pipelines. And by adding error handlers, we can make it so that when an error happens, the stream doesn't die. Because that's what's happening. The stream is dying and murdering our watch. But Gulp Plumber makes that a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and use it. I've installed the plugin. Now, every time you have a gulp.source, the immediate first thing you want to do is run it through Plumber. So I'm going to pipe it into money Plumber. So pipe into money.plumber. And then you can specify some options here. One option is handle error. And handle error will simply take in a error. And in this case, I can simply say console.error error. And then you must say this emit end, which actually means that we should not use this syntax. We should use that syntax because we are accessing the object context that we are running on, not the object context of that literal. So now let's go ahead and watch again. I did that before the source, didn't I? Add that into the list of things you haven't seen. Make sure that you run the .pipe after the .source. Remember, gulp, again, I'm leaving this video to emphasize something. Gulp.source is what opens the stream. So just doing gulp.pipe doesn't make any sense because gulp isn't a stream. But you can start piping when you open gulp.source. Anyway, we're now watching. We've added Plumber to our script handler. So if I come in here to my app.js and I split this guy and come over here to scripts, I can come in here and I can introduce a syntax error. Well, that's not really a syntax error. That's a syntax error. And hit Control S. And now we have Plumber found unhandled error, syntax error in plugin, Gulp Babel, message is unexpected token, but it hasn't died. And that's the important thing. I think I might have misspelled error, handle error, actually. Nope, I didn't. But still. Well, I didn't misspell it as much as didn't specify error handler. So let's go ahead and specify that. And now we'll get my own custom error handling when an error happens, as you can see right here. Now, the reason I show this is because you can go ahead and write your custom error handling. If you don't want to, you can go ahead and leave this empty, and you'll see the error that we got before. As you see right here, it'll say, Plumber will say unhandled error in plugin Gulp Babel, and then it'll give us that error message. So it really depends on what kind of formatting you're going for. But the point is that I can come in here to assets or scripts, app.js, introduce a bunch of syntax errors, and it keeps on running. When I fix those syntax errors, it then works. So again, though, styles have not been applied to Plumber yet. So let's go ahead and fix that. Let's jump into gulpfile.js. And for our styles, after we do .source, we're going to do pipe money Plumber. Plumper. So now I'll go ahead and restart this. And that's not how you spell Plumber. That's how you spell Plumber. The B goes after the M. And now we have Plumber being applied to our styles. So now if I go into my styles and split this guy and open up that guy, come over here, and I say maybe background red, which is awful, and that still works. But if I introduce a syntax error, notice how the stream doesn't die. And I can go and fix that syntax error, and it still works. So basically, stuff and things. Those are the differences when working with Gulp 3. You have a different way of creating your tasks and defining dependencies, a different way to deal with serial and parallel tasks, and you have to have some extra consideration for error handling. But I think this about wraps this up, and we'll see you guys in the next